Just a very quick thing before we start. I just want to let people know, maybe people haven't seen this. I have been doing this in a couple other videos, that I do have another channel, and it's about football and it's about history. And if you like football and or history, then it will definitely be for you. Most recently, I think I stumbled across a footballing mystery, and I think I may have solved a footballing mystery about a team name. So please go on over, I should say, to my other channel. The link is in the description. I'll also leave a pinned comment if you do like football and or history. Very sorry for bothering you, but I just started the channel and I want it to do well. So yes, any help would be appreciated. And now on to the video. Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today, in lieu of patch 2.18, yes, 2.18, and all the changes that came, I thought we would look at the metagame. It's mainly because unfortunately, I'm not going to get the chance to play the game today because I have to go out as the patch is releasing, so I won't have time to get you a gameplay video today. But so I thought I'd do the next best thing, which is kind of predicting what is going to happen with the meta, with some of the decks that we see before us. So with that said, let's dive in. We'll start with the kind of existing decks, and then I've also made some decks that I think could potentially be coming into the meta as well, that you might see sometime soon. So let's just start, let's work our way down. These are obviously the meta stats, kind of the amount of matches played, so how likely you are to sort of decks with the win rates next to them as well. Obviously, the kind of big one here that we need to look at is Vandal City Noxus, this kind of burn deck that has been persisting to exist for quite some time now. Obviously, we did see some changes to this deck, not to perhaps the ones that you would think that you would see them. Obviously, a lot of us were potentially expecting a poppy change that we did not get, but in this deck we did get a couple changes, one to Stone Stackers and one to Tenor of Terror. Unfortunately, these changes are not really going to make that big of an impact. Yes, I think Tenor of Terror will get cut out of this deck because the stat loss is just so much that I don't think it will survive that. But as I was saying in my video reacting to it yesterday, I don't think that will really matter because Lecturing Yodel is such a good option anyway, that you still have a very good 4-drop that you can just put in. This will become a 3-up instead. Then you've got one slot to fill, and I'm sure you can find something good to fill that one slot. Stone Stackers did also get nerfed, but it was kind of a very minor nerf. The difference between 1 health and having tough, on such a small unit, isn't really that big of a deal. It is like a tiny nerf in a way, but for this deck it really shouldn't matter that much. That's mostly a thing that comes into use with combat tricks, whereas this deck doesn't run. Well, is Noxian Fervor a combat trick? Not really. So this deck doesn't even run that. Imperial Demolitionist, I guess it does have some minor use with that, but again, I don't think that will really matter. Kind of surprised that this deck didn't get hit harder. I was, potentially expecting a poppy nerf. Maybe Vandal City Mare seems like an obvious one that they maybe should have nerfed. Because I still think as a 2-1, or if they wanted to play it safer and make it a 1-2, I think that would have been fine. Surprised that the Mare got away with it. But yeah, this deck will still be very, very good. And I think if you are building a new deck, like a Dragons or whatever else you think, might be good in the future, I think keep this deck in mind. The way that you counter this deck, of course, is to have, decent removal for small things. And having healing. Healing is pretty good against any kind of burn deck because, normally these decks, what they do is they get you down to about, 5, 6 health, and then look to their Pokesticks, Fervors, and Decimates to kind of finish you off from there. If obviously you can then heal up outside of the range of that, then normally you're going to be okay. So that's basically this deck still looking very fine, and we can move on to the next one. So we find ourselves at Draven Scion, and this one obviously not the same story because of course Draven got hit with a massive nerf, and also Lost Soul got nerfed, where it is in here, but it's somewhere here. Got a pretty big massive nerf as well. So this is a deck that I think will be hit by the nerfs, probably more so than most other decks, to be honest, because 2 of the sort of key cards, well, let's be real, the 2 best cards in this deck got nerfed, and and they got nerfed pretty substantially. I still think it'll be an okay deck, don't get me wrong. Draven still is going to give you value, even if, you know, they Mystic Shot him. You still got that X at the very least. You didn't get nothing from Draven, so he's still going to be, you know, okay. He's just not going to be oppressive anymore. And, you know, sometimes they aren't going to have Mystic Shot. This is what we all said about LeBlanc. You know, we were all like, oh, they're going to Mystic Shot you. Well, sometimes they aren't playing Piltover and Zorn, and sometimes they don't have the Mystic Shot either. So, you know, sometimes you can get value with that 2 health on a 3-mana unit. Like, it can happen. It's not out of the realms of possibility, so I still expect this deck to be okay. The Lost Soul thing does hurt quite a lot, and it'll be interesting to see if, particularly a Scion version, like Lost Soul in like Draven Caitlyn version, I think might stay, because it's still like a good sort of recursive tool as the game goes on. In a Scion version, it might change. It might become like a card that, you know, you need more aggressive options. You're going to look to win the game quicker, and you're going to go more in for an aggro sort of game plan. This deck might end up looking, you know, more like discard aggro as opposed to anything else. So keep that in mind. But this deck definitely will feel the hit. But I still expect it to be like a tier 2 deck overall, honestly. Next we have Zoenami, and this one, again, alongside Draven Scion, big changes. Obviously we got the nerf to Sparklefly here, probably the biggest nerf that any card got, if we're being real. And then we also got the Nami change. The Nami change was expected, and if it was just the Nami change, I'd say, you know, this deck's going to be a bit worse, but don't worry about it. It'll still be good, and if you love playing this deck, don't worry. But with the Sparklefly change, a lot needs to change about this deck. I don't think you can... I mean, do you run Sparklefly in this list anymore? I don't know, because it's such an important card. That's the thing. This deck either needs to change a lot, or maybe it can do better, and maybe it can survive, you know, the nerfs better than I expected. I think it's going to be one or the other. I do think this deck will end up being a lot worse, and I don't know if you play Sparklefly or not, because Sparklefly is such an important card in that deck that if you told me, in this deck, if you told me nothing else changed but Sparklefly was 3 mana, I would think you probably still would run it because it's that important. You know, it's how you survive against aggro. It's the reason that this deck was played over a Fizz Nami list, was because the Fizz Nami list had literally 0 ways to survive against aggro. You had no outs. There were no outs in that deck. This deck had Sparklefly. Well, if you find Sparklefly, and that's why you start running Gifts from Beyond to find Sparklefly, against aggro you can very easily win, because all you got to do is buff up your Sparklefly to have like 6 health, and then there's no way they can deal with it, and then you're just gaining life every single turn. They can't attack. You're gonna win. That was basically what this deck was doing, and I don't know if they can lose Sparklefly, because if you do lose Sparklefly, then again you're stuck in the same problem of, well, now you just lose to aggro every single time. You literally can't win. So that's going to be a bit of a problem. It's going to be interesting to see where this deck does go. I do think that the hits to this deck were pretty significant, because not only is it slowed down, which again doesn't help against aggro, and we know that the best deck in the game hasn't really been touched, so, you know, aggro is still going to be very prevalent. So yeah, this is going to be probably a bit of a problem. And yeah, this deck's probably going to struggle for quite a bit, but I'm interested to see, you know, where this deck actually goes, because it's either going to stick with the Sparklefly and double down, or it's going to completely shift, and, you know, might start running things like Star Shaping and things like that, and play for a much later, slower game plan. Then we got Plunder, and I don't think anything really changed in this deck, so it's still going to be, you know, a pretty solid deck. So good for Plunder. Plunder's one of those decks that I think everyone just kind of is okay with being good, because it's quite even against a lot of things. That's fine. Against Pink City, again, we got the Tenor of Terror change, the Stone Stackers change. So this might change a little bit. There's probably, again, you do have 3 Lecturing Yordles in this list, so it might be a bit more difficult to replace Tenor of Terror, but there probably are options out there, like Zap Spray Fin is, you know, another good 4-drop that you could put in there if you wanted from Bilgewater. So it's still not, like, terrible. You know, I don't think this deck is going to fall off a lot. This deck will depend on how it matches up against other things, and, you know, if we look at the other things that might be coming in, like dragons and like you know, I mean, maybe a Lux deck, who knows, you know, scouts maybe, it might struggle a bit against dragons, because dragons obviously are quite beefy and might be able to, you know, sort of out beef this kind of deck. You know, like Make It Rain isn't maybe going to do much against them, Parlay might not do a lot, Pokey Stick might not do a lot. You know, those kind of things might struggle against a Dragons deck, so it's possible that this deck might fall off just because of some things entering the meta. Moving on to Darkness, and I think Darkness only got a buff, actually, with Detonata. I don't know if that will make its way into the deck. I can't actually remember what exactly changed. I think, does it deal damage? Yeah, it scales with Darkness instead. So I'm not sure if this card will really get in there. I don't know. I haven't played enough Darkness to know, how far off that card was, how good it was. But yeah, this Darkness, will Darkness be okay? Darkness might have a better chance against dragons than others, because if you can get that Darkness up to 5 and 6, where you can just start killing most of the dragons, then, you could be okay. So yeah, it'll probably depend on that. I mean, this deck is very sort of champion, like, you kind of need to get your Darkness up, otherwise you're really struggling in most matchups. So I think it'll be slightly unfavored against Darkness. You look at a lot of these spells like Withering Wail and Battle Feast and Pokestick, they aren't really going to do much. And, even something like Stress Defense, which you might use to keep like your Veigar alive, probably won't work against like a Concerted Strike from a Dragon's deck. So Darkness again could struggle with some of the new things, but we'll see. And okay, that was just a quick look at some of the old decks and how they might fare and how things might move up and down. But now let's look at some new decks, some things that could come in. And this is my sort of first dragon attempt. I don't, whether this is correct or not. Again, dragons isn't like a archetype I'm very familiar with. But this is sort of my first attempt, and I will leave these deck codes in the description below if you want to play with them. It's a 1 Zoe, 2 Asol, 3 Shyvana. I don't think you ever want 3 Asol, just because, double drawing Asol is pretty bad, and, Zoe's just a good option to have anyway as a 1-drop. So, I think that this is probably the right balance if you do want to go Asol. Honestly, the correct list might not run Asol at all. I'm not quite sure yet. I do think it's possible that Asol could be pretty good, though, depending on what happens exactly. And, you look at this list, obviously Dragon's Clutch now is kind of your main, it's just like an MVP card. Like, this card is going to be absolutely insane after its buff. And yeah, like, this is both your finisher and a way to help, keep you in a game. And again, Ruined Dragon Guard is going to be really good, like a 3-mana 3/4 that has a good ability. Insane. Herald of Dragons gives you the real potential. And this is the thing, right? It will depend on how... You could go all in on Herald of Dragons. Like, you really could go, like, heavy on the Herald of Dragons and try to, sort of race people down. And a kind of Bandle City Mare where you could, like, play the 4-mana dragon, play, just all the lowest cost dragons you can to try and, hit someone in the face as often as you can. I'm not sure if that's the right way of going about things, but it could be. It very well could be, and it'll be interesting to see. I've kind of gone for a more traditional dragon stance, you could say, one that plays kind of at the old speed that dragons used to play, but it's very possible that, instead we get just a Herald of Dragons, pump those dragons out as quick as you can fest. I wouldn't be shocked if that was the case. But, you'll still get the power spikes of, like, Dragon into Shyvana. That's, like, gonna be, like, insane when that happens. You get turn 3 Shyvana, and Shyvana will probably level up at that point, and then you'll probably be fine. And, yeah, Ruined Dragon, like, there's plenty of just good options for this deck now. Like Dragon Chow into Herald, and then, they kind of feel like they have to remove the Herald. Then you play Dragon Guard. And then, you play Shyvana, it kills the Dragon Chow, you get like, 5-6 Shyvana straight away, and then, you draw a card. It's like, that, it's just gonna be so difficult to play against. It's gonna be so hard, and then, they're gonna remove your units, because now they've got big units, and they can, kill off your units with Concerted Strikes and Strafing Strikes. And then, they'll draw cards with Dragon Clutch. And, I've got Star Shapings in here to help against that burn deck. I do think that this will be important. And that's the thing, how much do you need to lean in to that? Because I don't know. You really could go for a Herald of Dragons, like, rally deck if you wanted to. But I have gone for the slower version. But I don't know if that's correct. But yes, this deck, or something dragons-wise, will be good. And, yeah, if you're wondering what beats dragons, by the way, if you're thinking like everyone's going to be playing dragons, what do I play to beat it? There are a couple options. Turbo Thralls is sort of known to be like a good dragon counter, because often you'll be playing at a similar speed, but they've got, 4/5, which are normally pretty big, or 5/5s, you know, with Fury that are normally pretty big, but you've got 8/8s, and you just kind of beat them. And you also have access to Frostbites, which are also pretty good against dragons, because obviously any of these strike effects, you know, you just freeze their unit, Frostbite them, and then, yeah, they lose, right? So, Thralls, Ash Noxus, as I said, Frostbites are normally pretty good against any mid-range Demacia list. And is there anything else I can think of? Not necessarily, but you know, those two will carry you. So if you like playing either of those decks, you should be able to do pretty well against dragons. Another deck that I, you know, want to try and see is where does Lux fit? Now, I have no idea. This is one really where I'm like, I literally don't know where to start. I went with Targon, you know, because Targon got a lot of buffs and things like, you know, the Solari Priestess, and you got access to like Loping Telescope. And, you know, so I was feeling like, oh, maybe Targon is the right way. I don't know. You know, we have a lot of healing, so I thought this will be pretty good against like the burn deck. But I don't know. I honestly have no idea where the best Lux deck will be. Obviously, Lux, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, got probably the most significant buff, particularly of all the champions, at least. You know, going down 1 mana is a massive buff. It becomes a 3/5, but that's way worth it to be 1 less mana. And you can Final Spark the Nexus if they don't have a unit, which is also very nice. And this kind of thing I think could be pretty good. You know, there will be some Lux deck. I don't know if it'll be like a Bandle City deck. You know, will it be a Shellfolk deck with Lux? I have no idea. Because we haven't really seen people try that because Lux wasn't good. Now Lux probably will be decent at least. And so I don't know exactly where the correct place to play Lux is, but I do think that this will be a pretty good attempt because, you know, with Lux, you still want access to, you know, some of the better Demacia spells like Concerted Strike and Single Combat, so you kind of need units that are somewhat bulky, which is why a good Targon is a good option. Again, I will leave this deck code in the description, but let me know what Lux ideas are out there because it seems like there could be a lot. And the final deck I wanted to talk about was the revival of Scouts. Obviously, we saw Quinn got buffed as well. It doesn't look like a lot, just the extra health, but it should really help Quinn, you know, attack. Get that extra attack in. So Quinn will be quite a bit better, you know, not insane, but quite a bit better. But obviously we did get a nerf as well with Relentless Pursuit getting nerfed, which means that I think that Golden Aegis will just be a better Relentless Pursuit at this point. I do think that is probable. That, you know, if you're running one of them, you will run this. But we also got some extra things as well, like Vanguard Sergeant became a 3/4, and being a 3/4 with like creating the 4 Demacia for this deck could be pretty good, because, you know, often you want to go pretty wide. You know, you have units that spread out like Mariah Warden and Island Navigator, Quinn, you know, so you've got plenty of spreading out potential, and giving Scouts buffs is pretty big. So this is going to be a power 3-drop in this deck now as a 3/4. Honestly, this is the kind of thing that people maybe should have thought about running before in Scouts, now that I think about it. Like, this card was probably a bit underplayed beforehand. Like, it was pretty good, especially in this kind of list. I'm almost shocked I didn't think about that. Because it seems quite obvious. But anyway, this list now I think will be pretty strong, and you're going to be seeing quite a bit of 4 Demacia. And yeah, if you want to go in with Scouts, you definitely can do, and I think you have, you know, the potential to sort of keep up with a deck like you know, the burn deck. You can potentially keep up with them, maybe outclass them, you know, pick off some of their units with Valor and whatnot, and then, you know, just go big with Vanguard Sergeant and just kind of, you know, outbeef them a bit, and then go from there and just win. That's kind of what I think you're looking to do. Obviously, with like Misfortune, just picking off their small units with Challenges and Misfortune, you should hopefully be able to survive, and then you should potentially just have the firepower to just, you know, punch through a bunch of other things. So I think it's very possible that this kind of Scouts list could be pretty good. And so there is sort of a pre-meta take on the patch 2.18 notes. Hope you enjoyed the video. As I say, I will be back tomorrow with gameplay, probably playing, you know, one of the new decks that I just mentioned. And yeah, so look forward to that, and I will see you tomorrow. So have a nice day, everyone.